your journey begins. Our shelves are stacked high where the magic never ends. From dice that roll true to tomes ancient and wise, we've got all the essentials for your game to arise. With adventure in mind, we craft every piece to make your campaigns flourish, your stories increase. For every TTRPG dream of stock is refined. Come find your next quest, leave the mundane behind. Epic Sages is where you find satisfaction. With the spark, you bring the passion. We control the board, you control the action. Epic Sages, where legends find traction. Our online store's a wonderland, easy to explore. With service that shines, whether in person or more. Need advice on your journey? We're here to assist. For novice and veteran, no wish will be missed. We've got what you need, from the basic to the grand, to bring your world to life with a masterful hand. From maps that expand to characters that bind. Epic Sages, always with an adventure in mind. Epic Sages, where you find satisfaction. We bring the spark, you bring the passion. We control the board, you control the action. Epic Sages, where legends find traction. Game with custom pieces so fine, handcrafted with care, designed to make your shine. From miniature heroes to landscape fast, we built every detail to make the magic last. When the final dice is rolled and the journey is done, we offer keepsakes that remind of the battles you won. In every treasure we offer, memories are signed. Epic Sages, always with adventure in mind. Epic Sages is where you find satisfaction. Bring the spark, you bring the passion. We control the board, you control the action. Epic Sages, where legends find traction. Satisfaction. We bring the spark, you bring the passion. We control the board, you control the action. Epic Sages, where legends find traction. Where legends find traction. Where legends find traction.
All right. Oh, we got all of that fun stuff out the way. Hello, welcome to tonight's podcast. We are joined by three fantastic star guests. Tonight's topic is, on that note, maximizing your stories with player suggestions. That's tonight's topic. That's what we're going to go with. But as per the usual, we're going to go through and introduce all of our wonderful guests, who they are, where you can find them, all that fun stuff. So we're going to start on the far side of my screen with Kristen. Kristen, who are you? What you do? Where do people find you? All that fun stuff.
Yeah. Hi there. I am a writer and an exercise physiologist and a health coach. And so basically, I spend a lot of time listening to people very thoroughly and figuring out what they need. And I go from there.
Fantastic. In the middle slot tonight, Alison.
Hey there. Yes, I am a writer. I'm a professor. I love to talk about stories. Everybody has a story to share, and I love helping them share it. So that's my big thing, and I can be found just about everywhere at author Alison Nissen.
Fantastic. Actually, jumping back to Christine, where would people find you?
Yes, that was a mistake on my part. I omitted that. I'm at designforfitness, all one word, .com. That's my website with blogs, cheat sheets, information about my books, all sorts of good stuff there.
Fantastic. And last but definitely not least, Peter. Who are you? What you do? Where people find you? All that fun stuff.
Hello, I'm also an author and a life coach. I'm developing organ wellness. That is my passion. I still explore it and try to find out as many new things as possible every day. And you can find me under organ wellness. And the best place probably is LinkedIn to get in touch with me.
Fantastic. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. And for those of you that don't know, with the organ wellness, it's more of a harmonic study, right? Is the easiest way to describe it for people who haven't heard of it before?
Yeah, it's harmonic study, but implemented in everyday's life so that it's tangible and that can improve your life and business. That is the idea.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to start how we usually start and ask you guys, when I say the words maximizing your story with player suggestion, what does that conjure for you? When you're talking about your business, Allison, if I say those words, what do they mean for you?
The first thing I'm thinking about is how I can take my story and other people offering suggestions on ways I can expand, network, meet new people, develop more content.
Okay, that's easy peasy. What about you? There, Peter. Jump to Peter.
Yeah. So for me, maximizing my story is all about myself, not other people. So how can I get the biggest satisfaction of whatever I'm doing at the moment?
Interesting. Okay, okay. And last but not least, over in the corner there, Christine.
Yes, to back to mine, I do a combo of talking to people all the time about their needs, their worries, their frustrations, everything in terms of I'm health and fitness, so I try to keep it related to that. But I also constantly reading and constantly expanding my mind with the things I read that aren't necessarily on point. I like to kind of mix it up a little bit and see what's going on out there.
Fantastic. Okay, so when I'm going to stick with you for a minute here, when you are dealing with your clients, right? What is the easiest way that you can coax suggestions out of them? Right? What is the easiest way where they can come to a realization of what they need to do? Do you do that at all, or do you kind of just give it to them?
Also, okay, sometimes I give suggestions, but then sometimes I'll just say, so what do you think your strategy would be or your solution would be? What would feel comfortable to you right now, the way your life is? That kind of thing. And I always talk about how their life is. I kind of know them anyway, but we try to slip it in there so that they can start thinking about their own problem solving so that I'm not the only one who's solving problems there. So that's how I do it.
Gotcha. Okay. Now jumping over to Allison. Allison, you talked about taking in suggestions for others for your own writing, right? But with your teaching side of things, when you're doing the professor work, um, I kind of have the same question for you. How do you get people to make their own suggestions or jump on their own hype?
People like to talk about themselves, and so it's easy for me to encourage them to identify with the story. I like to give parameters, and then I ask them, what is it about a particular story that they're connecting with? Let's take a writing example. So if somebody has had the experience of an educational system that didn't work for them, I start with the idea of, okay, that didn't work for you. Now, if you could explain, identify the points that or the biggest challenge. And that might look like a list, that might look like a free writing assignment, but they just sit down and take the information from their head and they put it somewhere else. So you put it on paper, you start identifying points that will be relatable to the topic. And so you're making those connections. In the end, everything that you're doing with a story is always about the audience. And so while stories are about you, like if you're writing a personal story, it is about you, but it's about the audience, because without the audience, you don't really have a story. You may have a journal entry. And so while we're thinking about the audience, you need to consider that, like, what is it that's valuable to you, but what is it that's valuable to you that you can share and help somebody else inform their own opinions? And so I like to help create that connection for an individual student to think beyond just their own circumstances.
Interesting. Okay. Well, that'll be important, so I'll kind of touch on that one later. Peter, jumping over to you, right? So as you are more an inward focused with your suggestions and ideas, where do you take external stimuli for that for though? Because no person is an island. You can't figure out everything yourself. Where's your easiest place that you just kind of snatch up your inspirations from?
So we're part of the environment, and also society. So um, we have to check for if we're talking about external validations of our ideas and fears and other things. It's just we need to understand who is our accountability partner and who cannot be our accountability partner, because it's extremely important that we don't discuss $1 million idea with people that are just looking for a job. And I believe that is the most important rule is to find someone that has similar goals to ours, or aspirations, maybe not even goals, because goals are overrated, but aspirations and dreams, and are willing to put in similar amount of the work that we are putting in, or we intend to put in. And then I'm 100% sure that most of the answers, regardless of the projects that we do, are inside us. So I try to help my clients get insight to have an introspective about their problem, and 99% that's enough to find a solution. When it's not, I try to steer them in a direction where I see, or where I believe that the solution could be.
Okay, interesting. So both Austin and Kristen had looked like you wanted to add on to that. Do you guys have anything to kind of feed off that? You both look very excited. So either one of you, who would like to go first?
I would say that, and I've incorporated this in the books I've written, is asking a lot of questions. So asking people, not just, I mean, as Alison said, people love to talk about themselves, but sometimes they don't talk in depth about themselves, or haven't thought about certain things about themselves unless you ask them in a certain way. So you might ask somebody, like just off the top of my head, I would ask somebody, so what would you think is your worst health habit? Maybe they've never thought about that before. Or what did you think about when you started to eat and exercise the way you do? How did you make those choices? So that part of that is to help people realize that things are not set in stone, that they have made choices in the past and they can make different choices in the future. So
Solid way to look at that, for sure. Allison?
Yeah, Peter, you were talking, you said a lot of things that I agree with. And the one that caught my attention was that goals are overrated. And I agree. It's like you don't want to be best, you want to be better. Because if you are best, then there's no place else to go. Like you're already there, you're at the top. So what are you going to do? You're just going to go down. So it's always striving for more. And so when you have a goal, it's finite. You reach the goal, then what happens? So I really resonated with that, because that's what happens with so many people is they set a goal, they set a thing that they want to accomplish. And well, if it's accomplished, great, or else they put too much pressure on themselves and think that, oh, I can't accomplish it. Then they close the door to their future because they are already afraid that they can't achieve something that they've set for themselves. So that goal it's more like mist, and it's that we shouldn't strive for the goal, but we should strive to be better and continue on improving in that direction.
That's a great way of putting that. And I'm gonna key off that one because it falls into the maximizing a story, right? Especially when you're playing T&D and RPGs and all this other fun stuff. Is if you're setting a goal to an inline, you are going to restrict your players, right? Because they need to get to this thing to get to their stuff, right? And on a lot of systems, that can be useful if you're playing shorthand sessions. But if you're playing for a long, indeterminate period of time, having that goal is either going to have the effect of where you're kind of doing a shonen style thing where you're just hitting the next harder thing and the next harder thing and the next harder thing until you run out of things that you can beat up, or open it up a little bit and have getting better, right? And that is the easiest way to fracture a story in a good way, right? To where it's not so linear, where you're getting all the interesting narratives, where you're exploring ideas for characters that aren't necessarily meant to explore those narratives, or at least not suggested to, so on and so forth. So having goals in some ways can definitely be good, but they should be at least loose goals. You know what I mean? The goal pole should be able to be pushed over relatively easy, right? Speaking of TTRPGs and stories, I want you guys to think about your own stuff just for a minute. I'm going to tell you a silly scenario from tabletops, and I want you to kind of think of something that might have happened to you in your stuff, right? So, several players are sitting around a table playing a game, and they are dealing with a monster. They don't know what this monster is. It has just been harassing the local townspeople, right? They know there's several people have been severely injured or are dead, and they're playing through this adventure and they're not finding any clues and they're just not going in the right direction. They get to a warehouse and the DM describes it as a warehouse and it's sitting in the distance looking ominous, right? To hint that the monster is in this warehouse. One of the players will pipe up, so when is it going to turn into a monster itself? And the DM will smile and say, right now. And the warehouse itself becomes the monster they fight. So, have you ever had that kind of scenario happen while you were working with your clients? We'll start with Peter.
Yes, that is a typical scenario that you have described. Uh, uh, of course, it's not literally that, but there is a problem that is not a problem, that is basically a fear. And when we are able to describe it and get a deeper understanding, and if we use a bit of Jungian psychology, we see that there's something in our dreams or in our childhood that spark this fear that has become monster in the process. And when we dissolve this trauma or fear, the monster is gone, and this monster might be the biggest opportunity of your life.
Okay, nice. All right. Alison, what about you?
Well, I feel like I was dealing with one of these scenarios tonight, and I had some individuals who were not self-aware. But the whole story you were telling me, I'm like, this is Beowulf. Except for the cave became the mother, and therefore we had the two dragons, and I just was taken back to my literature days, and I thought, well, Mark Twain has always said there's no such thing as a new story, and I went to Beowulf.
Interesting. Okay. What's up? That's a fun comparison to say the least. All right, and at the end goal here.
Okay, so I have noticed that a lot of people, they set goals, but they procrastinate. And like Peter said, you kind of you have to go into what exactly are you afraid of here? Why are you putting this off? What is it about this goal that frightens you? That you think you can't do, so that you keep putting it off and putting it off. And so if you can help people identify those kinds of things, that's a real win. Now, just as an aside, I'm a big fan of Stephen King, and I didn't used to be. I'm like, I'm never ever gonna read this dude. What is he doing writing about all this stuff? So then I started to read him, and the writing is so good. The characters are so well written. And I kind of know how he does. He actually feels his characters, and he goes, "Well, this character would have done this, and this character." But I digress. When you really step back from what Stephen King is doing, it's all about conquering your fears. Every single time, it's about something scary, and a lot of times he's got children or young adults who are finding their inner courage and bravery, and they are and figuring out how to conquer this fear. And it just, I feel like it's a shame that people don't realize that more often. I mean, when I saw it, I'm like, yes, of course, that's what he's talking about. But anyway, it's about facing your fears.
Interesting. So to kind of refocus on the warehouse aspect, right? So instead of a werewolf or a were-tiger, it's a warehouse, house that turns into a monster, right? And that's just a simple, funny idea that you rolled with at the table. Um, like, how easy is it for you when you're dealing with your clients to kind of have that natural progression of something that just is off the wall, something that probably shouldn't have worked out, but that's now their goal? Can you guys think of any examples of those kind of stories where you've been working with someone and they've just been said something offhand and that was the answer, that was the key, that's where they shot for? Or or conversely, you shot for because it seemed like the right answer at the time. Peter.
Yeah. Um, so I do believe that with the goals, they're mostly societal induced and they're unidimensional. Usually they are material, something that is tangible, because everyone talks about tangible goals, you need to understand. But a lot less important or promoted aspect of every goal is the our other dimensions like feelings, how reaching this goal would make us feel, and what lessons do we need to learn in order to get to this goal, what are the skills that we need to master in order to be able to reach this goal. And it goes to your answer that a lot of time the skills we need to learn and master on the way are much more important than the goal itself. That is why I said that the goals are overrated, especially these unidimensional goals. So as far as something completely, the fourth thing happens during our sessions, and it's extremely important when we do it right. We are able to distinguish between societal induced goals that we all are dealing with because society expects so much of us. And then our inner goals, that what we want because we want to be safe, we want to be respected, and all this stuff. And the discrepancy between societal induced goals that we are chasing and the inner goals that we should chase, because it will help build our inner stability and our inner satisfaction, because satisfaction is also extremely important, although in society today it's often overlooked, as it's not important, you have to sacrifice yourself to do something. But the way is also important, it's not just the goal, how you reach it. As I mentioned, the skills that you have to master in order to reach the goals are often much more important. So yes, often or almost always there's a case that the goal is something completely different than what we anticipated when we started.
Fantastic. Okay, so before I move on to the others, I just have to bring up, and one of the role playing games that we love to do as a company, called Legend of the Five Rings. They bring up this concept of societal expectations versus personal wants, and it's a I don't remember if it's a Buddhist concept or not, but it is Neri and Giri, right? Are the two warring factions in every person of what we're told to do and what we want to do. Um, so very very along those lines. Anyway, moving on. Alison, back to the original question for you.
So I'm not quite remembering the original question,
Gotcha.
but I'm totally thinking about the intrinsic and the extrinsic motivation of people.
Okay, so let's talk about
And
that
this
first, and then
happens.
I'll ask the question again.
Okay. Oh, the intrinsic, people. Some people are really motivated. Their internal everything about them, their internal drive is very internal, and they really set themselves a goal, and therefore they just go for it. And they don't really care so much about what happens on the outside. And then there's other people that would really, they have very little motivation on the inside, and it's all about the expectations of others and achieving that. And you see that a lot of times with students, where some students really are going for a grade or for an accomplishment, and others are doing it for their own personal self growth and satisfaction. And the trick is to balance the two. So when you have that idea that, you can actually have both at the same time, you don't have to have one that's larger than the other. And when you can get them in balance, then you can have somebody that really moves forward.
Yes. Again, going back to Neri and Gary, that is the whole concept of hitting that balance between the two makes you progress as a person. Anyway, back to the original question though. Speaking of the warehouse, right? Have you ever just had a client or someone that you've been working with, or a student in this case, that just like said something random or off the wall that either inspired you to come up with something crazy or inspired them to just take off on something?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I know I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, and we talk about what their goals are and what their plans, what their vision is, what action they have. And then it gets to the point of growth. Well, how are you going to grow? And they don't know where to look necessarily. And all of a sudden, they come up with ideas of ways that they could grow their business that they had never considered. And so suddenly it's like the vision and the action start to align, where before it felt painful. And so they are able to just start taking off like crazy. And the best part about that is when you're watching that success happen, is the celebration and the joy that follows it. So if somebody says, they said, I can't do something, they have that self-limiting conversation, and then they are able to reach out. And like Kristen said, they're able to tame that monster. They're able to take that inner voice and start to listen to it, not listen to it, to ignore it, so that they can um, hear what they're actually saying, as opposed to listening to that inner voice that's telling them they can't do something. And so they're suddenly reaching beyond what they're doing, but thinking about risk taking. And that's where I think a lot of it comes into, is that idea of how comfortable are you with risk.
Interesting. Okay. I like that.
But if you're
Well, I
really
would
looking
say-
for like a
I would-
scenario to improve your games, I'm sure we could come up with something.
I would say sometimes it's useful to let go of your goal, like Peter was talking about, because that goal is like, what is it? A lot of people aren't really sure where it came from or why it's so important to them, or what's going to happen once they reach that goal. So, okay, here, way back when I was being a personal trainer, and I was in a gym, and this woman, actually, I was in a physical therapy facility, and this woman came in and she said, I'm going to the islands in 3 weeks. I want a bikini body. Can you help me? I said, no, not in 3 weeks, but listen, let's talk about what else we can do for you. Like she walked in, her posture wasn't great, right? And she had back problems and she had knee issues. And I said, well, why don't we see if we can do some of that, and then your beach body will happen eventually if you really want to do that. But let's just take a look at some of these other things first. And lo and behold, like that was 20 years ago. I'm still in touch with her and basically her trainer. And the other thing is, people feel overwhelmed a lot. And she was like, no, I can't do an hour. I can't do an hour. No, never. So I said, okay, why don't you come in for half an hour twice a week? And so if you just bring it down to what they can do, and then make suggestions that fit in with who they are and what they're thinking and what they feel like they can do. And then sometimes you can move them along from that, but you have to kind of get there, just stand with them where they are first and find out what they're all about. And then and what they think they want, and then try to help them work through maybe a different scenario.
Interesting. So, I mean, a lot of our work is setting expectations for people, right? When we're telling these stories and playing these games, is setting that initial, hey, this is what we want to do and this is how we want to do it. And some of it is going and meeting people where they're at, right? Especially new players that have no idea what they're doing. There's a lot of hand holding, right? Which is good, right? That's the fun part, is teaching people. But being able to go where they're at and their understanding, and then develop from there, from a storytelling to a role-playing aspect to all those things, is going to be excessively important for people to maximize the stories they're telling, right? Because you can have a big payoff moment, but if no one cares because it wasn't developed right, who cares, right? You're wasting words, you're wasting time. If no one has any interest, we talked about the warehouse. If you reveal that it's a warehouse monster and it's the crazy thing that's taking care of people in the city, but you didn't there was no lead up to that, and no one understands what the warehouse is. They're like, yeah, it's a building. You store things in it. No, it's a monster. It turns into the thing. Nothing, right? But that aside, jumping into let's go back into personal stories for you guys, because it sounds like you guys all have a couple of them. Can you guys think of any of your personal stories where someone suggested something crazy and it just worked really well for them?
I have a moment where I was a college senior. I was a literature major. I did a lot of writing, and I had gotten a B on a paper, and I was very disappointed. And my professor noted that. Now, I was an undiagnosed dyslexic at the time, and this was before spell check, before grammar check. Save the. I mean, you want to talk about? I think the best invention ever was spell check, but that's another story.
I 100%
And
agree. No argument.
but my professor looked at me and he's like, "Hey, Allison, if you wanted to be a writer, you'd have an editor." And my mind just went like, psh. But I had no clue that that would be possible until somebody actually opened the door just a little bit. So one small comment changed my entire viewpoint of what could be possible in my life.
Interesting.
And that's the thing, is like, get that you have that one little comment, and that's it. You are able to change the direction of your future because of that. And if you're creating stories and you are able to throw in something that is just a little bit different, it can change the entire trajectory of the story and of the character you're building. Because as you're building character, as you're world building, you want to make sure that it's as livable as possible. So if I go back to the idea of Beowulf, I mean, Beowulf was a horrible leader, and you can go back and you can look at it. So when I hear about the I'm thinking the warehouse, right? I'm thinking, okay, we have the baby dragon, and then we got the mama dragon. The mama dragon's the one who's really fierce. Like, don't you touch my baby. And that's that warehouse going, yeah, man, I'm going to get you, right? So that's that idea of really coming to life. So you're taking what is maybe known, but then you're just shifting it a little bit and then building the world up and around it. And in many ways, that's what happened to me. So I had someone say, if you wanted to be a writer, you would have an editor. And that word would changed my entire life.
Nice. Okay. One simple word changes all the things. Yes.
So one time, well, okay, this before I wanted to write some books. I was done training, and I had been out in the world doing all kinds of things, and I was kind of retired. And I thought, well, I'm not finished. I want to write something about this because I still have a lot to say, but I didn't feel like I could do it, right? So I went to a writer's retreat up in New Hampshire, and one of the things that she had us do was to stand up and say, I'm the author of such and such a book. You had to figure out what the title was, such and such a book. It's coming out such and such a time. And here's what the cover is going to look like. And it just totally made me feel like I could do it. something about that just changed the shape of what was going on in my mind about writing a book. So I went on from there and wrote 3 books.
Okay.
So
Nice. I mean, that's easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? That one instant also changed your outlook on things and where you went and what you did with things. So interesting. So we're seeing a lot of one word changes. Peter, what about you?
My story is a bit more boring, but I will share it anyway. Um, for me, I was an entrepreneur and going into investment banking, and the companies that I could take over because of my team being able to source a couple of 100,000s were all sub-million companies. And then I had a mentor in London where he said, "Okay, why are you not going for bigger companies?" And I said, "Okay, I have problem sourcing more money for the projects." And he said, "Yeah, but that shouldn't be a problem." And I said, "That was the monster for me. So how can I source money?" And then he just said one word, and that is owner's financing. There are a lot of businesses that owners just want to get rid of it, and they will finance it for you, and you can pay for the business in the next 5 or 10 years. So that enabled me to buy companies that were a tenth of that were worth tenth of million of dollars at that time without external financing, and I was able to go into a completely different league. That was 100x move in my um, business, but also in my mentality, just because of this one word that was owner financing. And then going from there on, it was now it would be called crowdfunding, and but it was more like initial public offerings that were additional possibility, and that I could 10x that again. So that was 2 steps in my career, and from there on, I know that everything is possible, and every monster um, can be turned around and become our friend just by knowing a couple of the keywords or commands how to navigate the monster. And it monster can we basically become our friend or our ally and help us tame other beasts. And the bigger the monster, the bigger the beast will be able to tame in the future.
Interesting. Okay. So I mean, from everything that you guys are saying, right? It seems like very on point. You all had at least one interaction in your life that was a few sentences, a few words, a small conversation that completely changed the trajectory of where you were heading, right? So I think as storytellers, you know, it's a responsibility that we carry to make sure that we're noting those moments, right? So people understand that sometimes you got to pay attention to little things to get something big, right? Or it's okay to act on the little things to find something big. Obviously, act with intention and desire and all that fun stuff. Don't just necessarily jump off things willy nilly all the time. But if you take the little advice seriously, it can put you in the right spot, right? Now let's talk about a different subject of this tonight's topic, right? Which is and on that note, right, is a phrase that we use in DMing and other TTRPG to kind of like cut off conversation, right? Sometimes instead of jumping off a random idea and going with it, you stop it right there, right? Going back to the warehouse scenario, someone makes the joke about, oh, I bet the warehouse is a monster because it's like a werewolf, and you go, and on that note, you guys get closer to the building, right? And you push forward with the story you were trying to tell, right? And as a narrative storyteller, that can be very important, right? Because sometimes those random tangents can really just mess up what you're trying to do, right? If you're not one of those DMs or people that are ready to make up a random stat block for a giant building-sized creature, going back to whatever silly monster you were actually going to fight is probably going to be more important and better for you as the person telling the story and having fun in your own way, right? So, on that thought, I've been talking about doing the random fun stuff. What about the times where we stopped someone from doing something, right? You kind of just cut them off, like, that's a stupid idea and we're just going to ignore it. We'll start at the far end this time. Kristen? See, she got a good story, I can tell. You giggle beforehand.
Sometimes you can stop people by asking them why. Why do you want to do that? And they really don't know. So then they will automatically change the subject right away because they can't answer the question. So there's that. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, there's the old change the subject thing, like, oh, speaking of such and such, or just ask a different random question that they know. Oh yeah, I was just thinking, blah blah blah. What do you think about blah blah blah? Or why don't we switch over to blah 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 right now? That kind of thing.
Okay, before I move on to the next person, I'm going to ask a follow-up question for you. So, like, how do you worry about hurting people's feelings when you do that? Because getting snuffed can be rough to deal with. But do you worry about that, or you kind of just push forward when you feel it's necessary?
No, worry about it. Actually, I used to worry about it. I don't worry about it anymore because I feel like I know how to do it in a gentle way, and I spend a lot of time being lighthearted and laughing with people. And so we tend to just roll along, and I can just slip something in, and it's really fine. I mean, I don't worry about it.
Okay, interesting. Alison, jumping over to you for back to the original question. When you gotta go, and on that note, how do you do that successfully when you're handling people? Right. Again, you deal with students. I'm sure they come up with all kinds of stupid suggestions that you kind of just gotta yeet to the side and push forward with whatever you're trying to teach them. But
I did have a student who would continually talk the entire time in class, like never once stopping, just kept going. And I would have to really manage to pull her back, keep her quiet so that I could continue a lecture, which is always an interesting time because you don't want to, students are sensitive, and it's my job. I want to win. Okay. So my idea is I want to win the classroom. I want every single student to finish the semester strong. I want them to feel like they can move on to the next level without any doubt whatsoever in their mind. And then I have to also deal with personalities. And I will tell you that after COVID, students were different. COVID was that monster in the warehouse that came along, and then you have to say, and anyway, let's go back to what we were talking about. And I would just, you have to bring it back all the time. And so I do have a follow-up story that I was thinking about that's a little bit different, if you want me to share it.
please, we'll hear that, and then we'll get to Peter.
I had these little tiny bugs crawling all over my refrigerator, and I couldn't figure it. I couldn't get rid of them. I tried everything. I'd like spray it down with Windex. I'd wipe them off in soap and water, and I could not figure it out. And I called my exterminator. My exterminator came. He's like, I don't know what these guys are. I'm sorry, I can't help you. It's one of those. And anyway, my husband threw out a suggestion. Why don't you just use WD-40 or something? Well, did you know that flower mites cannot mate in WD-40? And it worked. It killed them. We got rid of all the pesky little, because those guys were procreating at extremely high rates. And so nonetheless, it worked. So WD-40 was on the other hand, that's what we did.
And on that note, we're going to move over to Peter. See how I did that? Smooth. Peter, jump into your time where you had to stop someone before they said something off topic, dumb, moving things forward, those kind of things. How do you do that with your clients and people?
Yeah, first, I have to do that often because I have a 12-step program that I have to do in 6 sessions. So I have to be on point because my coaching usually lasts for 6 weeks. We have 1 session a week. So I can be let's say, almost abrupt with them. But when we have, before we start the coaching session, I make it clear that I'm more like a drill instructor and I'm not so much a cheerleader as an accountability partner. So when things get out of hand, we have to go and do it fast. And I will stop the client if it goes in the wrong direction. We would stop. We can do a different session, a different um, coaching meeting for that. If they have like a trauma that was just discovered during our conversation, we cannot deal with this trauma. We have to deal with with our program first, and that is why I'm keeping them on track all the time. And I do believe that that is also um, the most important role of a coach or a teacher, that keeps people on track and give them give them guidance when they get lost, because else that there just can be endless wandering. And of course we can lead them in the wrong direction. That is a risk that we assume as a coach or teachers. However, um, most of the times, we if we vet the people we work with correctly, leading them in our direction is beneficial for them.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So, I mean, again, kind of getting a similar note from all you guys is that it is really for the benefit of the other person when you do this, right? When you kind of stop them mid sentence to move on to something else, it is either to keep them focused and moving on a specific thing, or to cut out the negative excess that they have, or to just make sure that they're not harming other people with their outbursts, right? Those are kind of the three key categories I got from you guys. Can you guys think of any other times where it would be appropriate to kind of throw it out there to kind of just eat someone off from what they're talking about to move on to something else?
You're moderating a
If
session with multiple people. A lot of times you need to be aware of the language that people are using, because people communicate in different manners. You have someone who is an emotional communicator, they will lead with their feelings. And if you have someone who's a logical communicator, they will lead with logic, facts, reason. And they don't necessarily communicate well together. And you need to stop sometimes, have someone stop and say, we need to check our words, because what the other person is sensing does not agree with them. And you can tell often by body language what is really happening. So it's, as a moderator, it's important that you can recognize that and ensure that the language people are using is acceptable to all parties.
Okay, that's a great way to think about that. I truly appreciate it because I do that all the time on the site. As you guys can see, we are very different groups of people hanging out together. So being able to do that and keep things moving along correctly is a good example. It happens all the time, unfortunately, both the best way and the worst way. Uh, so with that all that in mind, right? Having the short snubs stopping point, right? Relating it back to TTRPGs, when you're at that table and talking about the emotional connections versus the logical directions, while people are talking and using their language together, that is a big part of group dynamics, right? Sometimes it's really easy if you got a lot of yahoos that like to just do the math number things and roll dice and hit goblins. Uh, but it's also really easy when you got other people that just want to do stories together and talk the entire time. And getting them to work together in a cohesive manner where everyone's having fun is the sweet spot, right? That's what most systems lean for or jump to. Obviously, some systems are more built for one than the other, and sometimes you got to suggest a system or a story mode that fits a group the best, right? Um, so kind of when you guys are working with your peeps and whatnot, uh, how do you how do you rate that scale, right? You bring up this emotional versus logical session, but is that how you kind of categorize people? Is there something else that you guys use to initiate your, or not, sorry, not initiate, to classify your who you work with? And since this is mostly because of Allison, I'm going to start with you.
How do I classify people I work with? I try to start with an open mind. This is
Solid choice. Solid choice.
Yeah. Kristen had mentioned this earlier with the idea that you get to a certain point in your life and you're like, I just don't have time to deal with people that are just too all over the place, or they're just disorganized. And so going with it, approaching everybody with an open mind, especially when I'm working, there's times in one day I'll be working with 100 different people, and I want to communicate with every single one of them. And it's really important for me to listen and then to offer something back. So I try to get them to be able to focus, which is not always easy. And when they're focused, at that point we can guide the conversation a little bit better. And that's really what you have to do is when you, especially if you're creating groups, you get some groups and they all want to go together and they just want to whisper to each other, and they don't really care about the other people that are the other people in the group. And that's really challenging. At that point, it's a requirement that I would be like, now let's find out. And sometimes you have to get in and actually hands-on redirect.
That's a fantastic point from any perspective when dealing with a group. Sometimes you do have to get hands on, right? Move people around, do things. I 100% agree. All right, jumping over. We'll jump to Peter this time. Wahaha, Peter. Back to the question of how do you categorize the people that you work with, or do you right? Not every business categorizes who they work with, but generally, I think as people we do.
So when I have a public speaking engagement, I'm very limited in what I can choose and who I can work with, because the group is usually given. However, I would not or I would not accept a gig or a speaking engagement with a group that are particularly hateful or something like that.
Okay.
I would avoid that. But in one-on-one session, I have aspiration audit calls, and I immediately see if there's a potential for success in our one-to-one coaching. And I refuse about 80% of the people on aspiration audit call because I see that they don't have the potential to go through the program and to benefit of it. Because it's important that, especially in one-on-one coaching, we have to acknowledge that not every coach is suitable for every client, and that the client can benefit greatly if they choose a different coach. So we have to be humble in that regards and say, okay, I cannot help you. Especially in my case, is if you have a serious traumas that are unresolved, then I might not be able to successfully put you through my program, because your traumas will be triggered, and you will not be able to successfully finish our course, and you will have less benefit than if you go and talk to the shrink or someone that can deal with your traumas. So I'm really picky at who I work with. I only work with 8 clients a month, so I'm limited. And beside of all of these emotional, logical, and these methods, I really take special care if maybe that would not be the best expression, but if we wipe, is there a click when we meet? And if there is, I'm happy to work with them. If it's not, I'm happy to recommend other experts that would be better for them.
Nice. Hey, that's a great way to put it, to say the least. All right, Kristen, what about you? When you're dealing with your clients and your people, do you have categories that you kind of toss people into so you know how to deal with them appropriately?
I don't really, like to categorize people, but there are definitely some that are more logical and goal oriented and want a certain thing right now and by a certain time, and it may not be appropriate for them. So a lot of times I have to pull those people back a little bit and get more realistic about what can happen or how they might hurt themselves or how it just may be antithetical to what their goals really are. Other people, I have to refer out to some of the folks because some of them I suggest they go get tested for ADHD or dyslexia or and some folks are very close to being food addiction. They have food addictions or binge eating disorder, those kinds of things. So I have to be alert to those and not think that I can handle it myself and just say, look, I think this is something that needs to be handled by somebody else.
Gotcha. Younger, your camera is broken again. Um, so last minute, Younger comes in to join us. Wahaha, blame the storms. But I'm gonna kind of get your guys' final thoughts on things, right? With this whole, and on that note, and maximizing your stories and whatnot. What is your final takeaway from what we've been talking about at this session? And then after that, we'll do our final goodbyes and all that fun stuff. So, starting with Peter, I'm gonna go back and forth, make my life easy. Wahaha.
Yeah, for me, it's important to acknowledge that there are monsters living among us, and we get to know them when we're really young. We befriend some of the monsters, and we make other monsters our arch enemies. And it's up to our psyche and our inner work that decide which monsters we will befriend and which will be our enemies and which we will attack.
An interesting way to look at that. Alison.
Yeah, I like what Peter had just said. I think that if we think about the monsters of our lives or the monsters in the games that we're trying to defeat, we really start with just small steps. When you have a small step, that way you can plan for a small action. And small actions lead up to bigger actions. And with bigger actions, you have growth. And that's what we're really looking for, is that idea that in order to greet the monster, whether that's the warehouse or anything else, is taking those small steps to prepare so that when you do meet it, you're able to grow and understand. You know how to pivot, you know what to do if you need to make adjustments. But without having the small steps to start, you're never going to get there.
Very important. I like that. All right. Last on our final thoughts.
Okay. I would say that it's important not to think of a person as one thing. People are multi-dimensional. You can't categorize them. Everybody wants to be heard. Every single person wants to be heard. They want to feel loved. And they also want to feel competent. Okay. So, excuse me. Part of my job is to listen to people and to help them to feel competent and in charge of their lives so that they can go forward as they wish. Nobody is all good or all bad. Nobody is just a total monster or not a monster. There's always something in there that may not be, maybe a monster, but maybe not as much of a monster as you think. So I think you have to keep an eye out for that.
Okie dokie. And we're going to continue with you. And where can people find you? What you're working on? All that fun stuff. What's the best way to get a hold of you in the future?
You can get hold of me on my website, designforfitness.com. I have a coaching program there that's available. You can take a look at that. I have a free assessment you can look at. I blog frequently. I also blog for Psychology Today. I've been doing that for about 3 years. So there's lots of, my blog is called Health and Human Nature. So what I like to do is bring what our goals are, what our goals mean to us, and what are the intricacies of actually reaching those goals. It's a lot harder than you think. So anyway, that was a long answer. That's where I can be reached, designforfitness.com. My 2 books that are out now is The End of Try Again and an action workbook. They're both available on Amazon. They're really good if you buy them both together, I would like to say. So again, it's The End of Try Again, Amazon.
Fantastic. That's it. At least it's easy to spell. So, jumping over to Alison, where can people find you? What are you working on? All that fun stuff.
I can be reached if you Facebook, Instagram, author Alison Nissen. That would be easy. You could find me at revelcoachstory.com. And I have a new book out called Write Your Book Now to Change the World. It is a 6-step program to write your nonfiction book now so that you can change the world.
Hey, the title is on point, to say the least. I like that. And last but not least of our star guest, Peter.
Yeah, I'm available on all platforms, basically. I prefer LinkedIn. You can get in touch with me. And I would also recommend that you read my last book, Time to Close Your Factory of Broken Dreams. And you will find it in all places where ebooks are available. And I would just like to close on a note that if you want to make a change in your life, not higher goals or better goals, maybe you just want to feel better or more at ease with yourself, go get a coach. That's one of the advice, because we need accountability partners. We have drifted too much apart as a society, and we need someone that can be a bit of a cheerleader and a bit of accountability partner.
All righty then. Well, with all that being said, for our stuff, we don't have any fun events going on for the end of the month. Our stuff starts up in October again. If you're on the website, get your 10% off by using the code BABYBRAIN, because I have yet to change it and looked that up last week, and apparently I was lazy last month. The code still works though, so use that one. BABYBRAIN907, all capital letters. Younger, you got anything that we gotta talk about before I forget about things?
Nope. Mostly because I joined in extremely late due to weather.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah.
It sounds like this crew was awesome, so I need to watch the first half. And so I apologize.
No need to apologize, buddy. We'll get to it. But with that, we're going to play a silly video. I shouldn't say silly video, a sad video. We're coming to the end of the era for the Wheel of Chaos. So we made one final video. For those of you in the waiting room, I will give you head signals when it's over, because I don't think you'll be able to hear it or see it. If you can, cool beans, but if not, prepare yourself for me to wave hands. With adventure in mind. Hope you all have a wonderful time. To the final Wheel of Chaos. So, it's come to our attention via community voting and all this fun stuff that we're going to evolve a little bit. We unfortunately are going to be getting rid of the wheel. It's no longer going to be a monthly item that we give out. It is instead going to be a voted for thing by our subscribers of Wizards Tea. Every month from here on out, they'll have 2 private votes in their little section of our Discord that allows them to decide what item they're picking this month, or what item we're making, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, we just thought it'd be fun to do one final spin and see what the wheel lands on, and then I'll, dramatically have an exit and all that fun stuff. So here we go, the final spin. Well, it wouldn't be Epic Sages without a silly exit. So long, and thanks for all the fish. Also, again, subscribe to our Wizard C. $10 a month, get you all kinds of fun benefits on the service itself. 20% off at the store at a minimum, and then you get cool items every month, along with all the other extra silliness that our subscribers get. With all that, with adventure in mind, I hope you all have a wonderful time. Bye-bye.